Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. We're here once again with another episode for yourselves, and we're going to be discussing medicine for love with our lovely guest. Before we actually introduce him, I want to remind you that you can join in the conversation tonight, and you can dial in by calling us on 01924 231 083. Please do ask the bill payer's permission, as standard network rates do apply. However, if you want to message me and I'll read them out anonymously, if you wish for me to do that, you can choose by messaging me on our free WhatsApp service. And that number is 07585835150. We have a very interesting topic tonight. And inshallah, we will have this conversation with our lovely guest. And obviously, all of you, wherever you're watching, you're going to be streaming on either Facebook or Twitter or live on Sky Channel 752. We do welcome all of you, and I'd like for you to help me welcome my guest tonight, who is Mohammed Ishaq. Assalamu alaikum, Mohammed.
Walaikum salam rahmatullah. Hello.
How are you? So nice to have you here and join us on the program.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me on, and I'm very excited. It's a long time coming, but we're
Definitely.
here.
We've been planning this for so many months now, but honestly, the timing's amazing. A lot of us are, wanting the recipe, the sort of ingredients, the medicine, whatever it may be for love. But we're going to go into that in a few moments. Tell me a little bit about yourself first and what makes you have these answers.
Well, I'd like to think that all that I offer is a perspective, and I think that a perspective shift is sometimes what we need. So myself, I am a born and raised Birmingham lad, and I think what my journey pretty much consists of trying to seek knowledge, trying to better myself, and in the process of seeking knowledge, it took me to many different places in many different countries as well, and then as time went on, I just developed as an educator, as a teacher, and part of the teaching that I do is self-knowledge, the temperament, Islamic medicine, and a whole bunch of stuff, to be honest, but really just seeking solutions to problems that many of us have in life. And I think that's really the focus, and I think that's the solutions that we need, is just another perspective, fresh eyes. Things don't magically change, but by knowledge we can see more, and that's the kind of the approach that I take.
Amazing. You actually mentioned the word magic. So is there a magic potion that you have when it comes to medicine for love? What is medicine for love? Explain to me. Let's define this.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that I think in today's time, we talk about psychology, we talk about mindset. These are like buzzwords in today's time, and they indicate really a psychological frame that we're working from. But when we look at the idea of psychology itself, psychology is quite deep, right? Because traditionally the understanding is the study of the soul or the spirit. So for us, and especially as Muslims, that our mindset and this whole framework of seeing things has to be, rooted in that theological or theocentric, in that sense, like rooted in God, and the tradition set by the Prophet ﷺ. So when it comes to psychology, how could that ever be disconnected from those prophetic traditions? And in the similar manner, when it comes to this idea of medicine, when we talk about prophetic medicine, was a massive part of the Islamic tradition. And how can we have mindsets and this psychological approach that's disconnected from Islamic medicine? So what we find is Islamic medicine, which is a study of the natural laws and the natural ways in which things work, and for human beings to find solutions by the natural order and as per the guidance of our tradition. Well, why don't we, in the same manner where we see a physical problem and we look at solutions from the natural world, well, why can't we also find solutions to our relationships, which are fundamentally mental challenges? And why can't we find solutions in that sense? So for some people, when you take a more natural approach to things, it's almost like magic, and it's mostly because we've all been trained to have this, this modern kind of understanding that, it's like it's an approach that we've never really tried, but but it's actually very simple sometimes. It's just a case of, like I said, perspective shift, and shift isn't rocket science. However, it's extremely powerful, and that's called like the alchemic process. This was something that the Muslims saw Islamic psychology and medicine as an alchemic process, because outside nothing has to change, right? You can still be in the exact same situation, but you can go from, the power of it is going from saying, why am I in this situation, right? None of this makes sense, to saying within one setting, or one moment, you can go from that to saying, this is perfect. This person is perfect for me. I understand. And all that alchemic process and that rooting in the Islamic tradition is fundamentally understanding the greater picture. That's the perspective shift. Like when you read Quran, for example, like, how many countless occasions where we've been told about there's a bigger picture, there's an end result here, and those are great, they're not simply coping mechanisms, because we don't see it like that. That's not how our belief system is. Rather, we see that we open ourselves to the truer realities of things. And what an incredible mind shift when you realize, wait, hang on a second. No, what's really going on here is, if I'm tested, and this is my challenge, this incompetent person who I'm supposed to live with for the rest of my life, maybe, just maybe, all these lessons that will come from this one individual is actually all that I've been asking for this whole time. But I thought it'd come in this romantic form of, wonderful wavy locks, and and instead it comes in this other form. And truly, as is reflected in the Quranic tradition, that perhaps there's something that you don't like, but it's actually better for you. And human beings, by knowledge, can actually come to know those realities. What a beautiful place, Fahima. We've had conversations about this. How much stronger we become when we now know versus when we don't know. Alone, that's like, in Arabic, I'll give you a quick little interesting nugget. This word of fear, for example, like we're in a time where people don't want to be anxious, right? And fear is something that people kind of run away from. Well, in the Islamic tradition, what's fear? There's two words. There's khawf and khashya. And khashya is actually a good thing. You need to have khushu in your prayer, and khawf isn't necessarily a bad thing either. So being anxious about your end goal and these types of anxieties are good anxieties. Maybe that's why we have anxieties, and not for creation, but for the creator and real, like, bigger issues. But anyway, but what's interesting about khawf and khashya, and how you alchemize from being fearful of a thing, you're still fearful of a thing. What's the difference? Is khawf is a fear where you don't know, and khashya is when you fear something but you know it. And what a difference that Allah says about those people who come close to Him, that He says la khawfun alayhim. They don't get they don't have fear, but they do have khashya though. And that for human beings is just understand, learn the situation that you're in, and you can go from literally being in this freeze or flight mode, or maybe even a fight mode, or maybe you're tap dancing in a fawn mode, and you can go from all those modes to just saying, oh, everything is as it's meant to be, right? Like,
It's a very
who are ala kulli
philosophical
shay'in
way.
qadir.
Sorry, it's a very philosophical way of looking at life. Do you think people are geared up for that? Do you think what are
No,
the steps to actually understanding this way of thinking and believing? And obviously, with my psychological background as well, I understand everything you're saying, but I can hear some people sort of trying to say, well, how do we even start this process? I mean, what is the actual medicine for love? Is it just knowing? Is it just
no,
awareness? Or
you know,
is it also love is medicine? Like, how would you sort of describe it?
there comes a point in everyone's journey, and I think Michael Jackson also, to quote Michael Jackson, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. That everyone comes to this conclusion at the end of the day. It doesn't matter which philosophical position you take, and whether you philosophize or not, right? Whether you think or not, inevitably you face the reality that I am the culprit, right? I am the one who's in my way. I have an expectation. My expectation, which was false, led to my dissatisfaction, and only if I knew. And I think that, though the philosophical aspect, the medicinal and the knowledgeable aspect is maybe not everyone's cup of tea. However, what it leads to is where everybody actually concludes, like, yeah, actually, maybe I do need to have this perspective shift and mindset shift. And I think that that is the point, that is like, what is love? Is like, this is what it changes, and it's a good question. That is then love this wonderful noun that we just expect will land in our lives, or is it a verb which we choose to do? And that's the end goal, that the road of loving is actually the place to be, versus magically it will fall into my lap. And I think that those are the kind of shifts that start to form. And I also, I would say that, you can't underestimate people. If you have a real conversation with people using the right terms, everyone gets it. Everyone's an intellectual when it comes to
Do you think
real life.
love is something that, we
Yeah.
even kind of try to reach, or is it between us? Is it within us? I mean, is that how you would teach even understanding love before even defining it? Because it's not a thing. How would you define it?
Love obviously has its, its objective reality, and it's important to understand love, and so I think that all these things lead to a personal question, which is, where am I seeking things that, like, am I seeking these realities that should be linked to God and should be linked to these greater realities? And am I reducing them, that I, love this streaming channel, or this person, or this person I've just met for like 2 months? Like, is that love? And what is love? And I find it really interesting. You can read Imam Ghazali's, I think it's his 36th book in his Ihya Ulumuddin, fascinating book called Love, Longing, Intimacy, and Contentment. And I remember looking at this thinking, my goodness, everyone's looking for these things in everything: love, longing, intimacy, and contentment. I mean, half of social media usage is intimacy seeking. And I don't mean, in the crude manner. I mean literally looking for a friendship blocked by a plastic screen. And I think that ultimately what people are seeking, and I think there needs to be like a learning of that. So I think for a lot of people, a lot of these answers are actually within ourselves. And it doesn't require like this massive amounts of learning. Sometimes it's just a question to ask that will produce that perspective shift. But of course, we're all looking for love, and I think that the successful manifestation of what it means to be a human being will always be in that prophetic a prophetic way. And I think that's the sort of stuff that I communicate and try to gear myself and others towards.
Beautiful. Well, you've given us such an amazing introduction, and it's actually taken us nicely on to our first break. But you started us off very deeply, and we're going to divulge much more in detail and in depth in a few moments. So please do stay with us as we talk to Muhammad about the medicine for love. And if you have any questions, please do call in. And I look forward for you tuning in when we see you at the other side of the break. Take care. Bye.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, where we're discussing the medicine for love. A very, very deep philosophical introduction by Muhammad earlier on, and I hope that you took some note, because it is really deep, actually, conversation. And I think a lot of us don't understand that, and we don't even look into it. And the thing is, I just want to ask you, how do we show up as people when we are looking for something like love at the end of the day? Because at the end, we are all either single or in a relationship. We come from either trauma, or we come from experience, whether especially rejection, attachment, bad experiences. So that's where the problem is. And then we look for love. And when we say medicine, it's like as if it's a healing, right? It's a healing. Love is healing. Medicine is healing. So if love is healing, why does it sometimes hurt so much? And why is it something that people want, but actually feel that it's such a fear, because it should be healing, but at the same time, it's really difficult to manage. What's your thoughts on that?
There's a couple of things with that, and I think this idea of medicine and this like medicine for love is as if we have to go to like healing. And I think a lot of it, medicine, is more like restoration and kind of bringing a person back to this optimal that our default, which is more fitra related. So what happens is we actually, by poor diets, right, from a medicine perspective, from poor diets, we then develop poor bodies. And in the same manner, from a mental perspective by a mental poor diet, which is the type of knowledge. And I think that's why I kind of like started with this principle and this philosophical point, because when it comes to a lot of this stuff, you have to go to the foundations of it, the first principles. For example, and I think this is a really good question to ask people. And I remember I was asked this a few times, and by my teachers, and I remember it being like a really enlightening moment where the question was posed that how do you define love? What is love? And I think that before we get to the objective answer, a question worth asking is for people to recognize where they currently are in relation to love, and how do they see love. And we got to this point where you want to look at how the Prophet ﷺ saw it, and you want to look at what does it mean, love, and fundamentally it's to make sacred and to sacrifice. And this is a completely different shift to this idea of love is a receiving of love versus love is to give love and to love. And in a relationship, the focus on the other and what one can give, and these types of things will always be in the long term more fruitful than a self-centered approach, because that's not, that can't be love. That's just, a type of a pleasure seeking. The difference between giving someone pleasure and receiving pleasure, for example, what a difference in realities. It's like a person who keeps all the crisp packets versus the one who gives all of one's crisp packets away. That is, an indication from the motherly love and from that rahma aspect. And so these are the things that when we look at love and we look at our approach to it, really we have to ask ourselves is, am I seeing this situation as the Prophet ﷺ saw it? And am I aligning in behavior and aligning in approach as the Prophet saw it? And some of us, what we end up doing is we all we see is this object of love, and the object of love sometimes may be ourselves, maybe another person, but ultimately it ends with creation. And that's where a lot of people have a lot of problem, and all of us do, to be honest. As long as we can remember God and that higher reality in it, we can deal with the thing that I love and I live for to just maybe not give me that full credit back. It's still okay, because ultimately it wasn't for you. But if it was only for you, for example, or my love was only for a person, only them, and the end result being them, then their response will be very difficult for me to deal with, because I've put all my eggs in this basket, but the eggs are supposed to be in the ultimate basket. So it's like that's the kind of approach where, and this is all that I spend my time on. Really, it's aligning ourselves and checking where we are and how we can get to a more prophetic centered love, and that will always be an exploration of how we're defining and how we're seeing things.
I love that. I think that's really important. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that's why we get it wrong, because we are looking at modern day sort of Western values and society and what is being thrown at us as, firstly, the definition of love as this thing where, we actually have to receive, and it's an outside sort of perspective. But at the same time, sorry, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, look, Fahima, I'm just going to jump in here for a second. Just look at, now I said a physical diet, right, for our physical restoration of fitra, of love, or our being, for example, our optimal health. Well, in a mental sense, if I understand love being from a romanticism idea, right, which was a whole movement that kind of crept into the Western world, and then we have many manifestations from Hollywood to Bollywood to all these types of manifestations that we are being tricked by our mind because we think this is how it works. It's so interesting that like there's so many false realities projected, and it's so interesting. It's like you can't even have somebody rest on your shoulder, except that it starts to hurt after a while. And no matter how long that they show in the movie that they do it for like 2 hours or whatever, and this is closer to a reality, and this is the thing that I kind of bang on about in anything that I try to teach, even to myself and to others. And what I learned from my teachers is getting closer to realities of things, because romanticism alone, and if I would highly recommend people to read about romanticism and read about that movement and what was once upon a time poetic expression of love related to the divine, right? Layla was an example, which Layla was like this term used for divine love, right? Or the object of the divine love. And now it's like Layla is a real representation of, Shyster in school or so and so that I met. And then people apply this divine love, and Rumi is applied to, and not to say that isn't love, But it's like because I did ask my teacher once, I said, we read about a lot of divine love, and then we, should one love one's wife in the same manner? How does it work? And he said,
I was going to
in
ask that
loving
because we are
your
human beings at the end of the day with sort of very
yeah.
minimal way of living. And at the same time, even if we, especially like men and women, maybe for a man sometimes that could be easy to accept where that is not given. But maybe for someone, and I am generalizing here, but we feel the need to be shown and to be spoken to, or even sort of given sort of like gestures in that way. So does that take it away from it? Because it's all about the divine, it's all about this. So it kind of like gets you out of it in a way, the loop as to how to be.
So this is what I asked him. This is exactly what I asked him. I said, well, hang on a second. Like, how are we supposed to see then worldly love if there's divine love and worldly love, and this classification alone? I learned a ton about life when I started to learn this classification. And then he said, loving the wife will allow a person to love God more, and loving God more will allow a person to love the wife more, because it is love itself. The reality of love does that change? Even if you have sacred love or the divine love or love for creation, and ultimately when you do love, like the Prophet ﷺ loved, right, for Allah's sake, and then his love for people was incredible. We have that false form now where we say, I love you for the sake of God, so I'm going to give you criticism, like, or something like that, right? Like that's not like sincere. We already know it. The moment a person says, I love you for the sake of God, and sometimes it's like, wait, you loving me for me? Right? But the ultimate, I do love you for the sake of God, and as a result of that, I love how you do X, Y, and Z. And so you can still love, and walk around in daisy fields and hold hands and have all that wonderful experience, right? You just don't see that as the end goal, because if the weather changes, we shouldn't give ourselves a hard time with whatever our picnic was meant to be. Do you know what I mean?
So then those who have less Iman, less faith, less knowledge of their, religion, right? Do you think then obviously there is the lack of the whole idea of relationships being a success? Because that's where it obviously comes down to.
I would never equate Iman with knowledge, just because it can lead to like dangerous conclusions for people, because just because I have knowledge doesn't necessarily mean I have faith, right? Just because I know Aqidah doesn't mean I have that belief, that Iman. So Iman is a statement of the soul, whereas belief, i'tiqad, for us is a certainty that corresponds with reality based on evidence. All my theology students right now are like, woohoo! but anyway, but the point being is, yes, we are all, a great moment to realize for all of us is to realize that all of my choices, the choices that I can make, stem from the knowledge that I have. The more knowledge I have, the more choices I can make.
But then where are you getting that knowledge from? That's what I'm trying to say. Is it coming from faith? And if someone has less sort of like of that sort of direction, shall we say, going in that direction and seeking in that direction, then doesn't that make a difference?
And that's why they would absolutely need to seek knowledge. That's why we were instructed, قُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, not رَبِّ زِدْنِي إِيمَانًا or رَبِّ زِدْنِي نُورًا. Like, there are other expressions of like, increase me in light, make me light, make my bones light, etc., etc. Wonderful du'as that we read. But this command of seek knowledge, because knowledge is that foundation to which then you come to know the truth, and you can measure reality by and start to see reality and come to know the truth. But yeah, people have to go to knowledge first, go to sound sources of knowledge, and then from there you can go into all these other areas of like, okay, in this aspect, like for example with medicine we've been referring to now, a massive part of that, like people may be thinking, oh, I just make analogies all day between medicine and the physical world, like the mental world and the biological world. No, like what we have is we have these principles that manifest. And one of the most important things, I'll give you a principle in medicine, which is whenever you are trying to treat a patient, you must not know simply the nature of the disease, you must know the nature of the person, right? Basic. So when I'm dealing with romanticism, for example, as the disease, for example, I have to know the nature of the person, because some people already don't believe romanticism, and others are dancing with romanticism every day. And that is important to come to know one's nature, aka one's mizaj, one's constitution, and one's temperament. And that's where a lot of the focus then of the study, when people say, all right, Muhammad Isaac, you got us, man, you made us think about love, where do we go next? Like, it's know yourself, right? It's to start to come to knowing yourself and to understand what is my constitution and what am I inclined to, because that's where my preferences are. And my preference, and we have like a really rich framework in this, and it's really exciting to like when a person learns this, because you start to realize that all of us human beings we're like these chemical reactions. And when it's good, we have nice chemical reactions, and when there's like a friction, we have bad reactions. So what we need to do is become chemists, somewhat, and start to learn how do we actually, when should I be this and when should you, if both are extroverted, then there's a clash of who's taking top spot in extroversion and between a man and a
Wow,
woman in
that's so
certain
interesting,
scenarios.
Mohammed. But you know what? We're going to come back to that because you've actually touched on something that I
Sure.
really want to go into a lot more deeper. But we are coming onto our another break. So please make sure that you are going to be staying with us as we're going to go into it again with a lot more in-depth detail. And inshallah, we will be seeing you in a few moments where we'll be discussing more about the medicine for love. And you can join in the conversation and listen after the break. We will see you shortly.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back, and thank you so much for all of you guys that are joining us tonight here on Single Muslim Live, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We love having all of you tune in and constantly giving us your support, and we really do appreciate even the engagement and interaction, any of your comments, and even just saying hi and things like that, we do actually acknowledge. So thank you so much. We are having a conversation about the medicine for love with our lovely guest, Mohammed. Mohammed, you mentioned before the break this word temperament. Explain more, describe it to me. What do you mean?
So this idea of temperament is really our natural patterns of behavior. This is part of a person's mizaj, a person's constitution. So many people have referenced or have heard in life this reference to a temperament, maybe from a traditional understanding where people said that you have a garam mizaj or a tand mizaj. So this would be like a hot constitution or a cold constitution. And this was generally seen from the perspective of a biological sense, but there's a great amount of insight it gives when you look at what that means in terms of mental aspects. So a person of a hotter mizaj, they have a particular tendency or a particular way of being versus those who have a more colder mizaj. And there's a great amount of self-knowledge that can be understood when we look at this. But what's also interesting is the temperament, because it's so natural. It's for a lot of us, it's our comfort zone. So for example, we have these four major temperaments, and each of us is a combination of all four. There's Latin terms, there's Arabic terms. I mean, I'm just going to give the Latin terms here so people can become familiar: sanguine, melancholic, choleric, phlegmatic. And each one of us is a unique combination here of these hot, cold, moist, dry principles that would be used in traditional medicine. They also apply to the human being and pretty much everything. And once we start to see our unique combination, we start to realize our behavioral patterns, that there are like 80% universal consistencies in how we behave. And when people are having this argument of how things should be, especially in the case of a relationship, because you deal with the nafs a lot, you deal with your own nafs and the other person's nafs. What that means is you're also dealing with your own comforts and your own preferences and the other person's preferences. So when you learn the temperaments, you start to realize that 90% of your problems are just a case of mismanagement of our temperaments. So these are the classes that we do, and it provides a great amount of insight when you start to see those who are more of a more choleric temperament, which is more fiery in nature, versus somebody who has a more phlegmatic temperament, which is a more cold and moist. Those are two different people, very different people. Or that you have the sanguine who's an optimist, and you have that melancholic was more of a pessimist or an idealist, and what a clash they would have. And so in this navigation of first coming to know oneself, this journey of self-knowledge, where people have these realization moments where they're like, oh my gosh, that I thought I was the only person saying that to you, or you were the only person saying that to me. But hang on a second, when you read the material and the temperaments, you realize, wow, like I'm just behaving like my natural self, and maybe I should actually start to connect for example, with the other person. So some are more social, some are more antisocial. For example, like a sanguine is a social butterfly. A melancholic likes their space. Imagine on an evening, a sanguineous husband says to his melancholic wife, "Hey, why don't you come out?" And she says, I prefer to stay in today." In that moment, there's two massive differences in understanding that can happen. One is that it's just temperaments, this is just natural preferences, and it's not that deep. But the wife may think that, why doesn't my husband want to spend time with me at home? Does he not want to stay with me at home, for example? But he's a sanguine, he's a social, he just wants to be extroverted and go out and spend time, for example. And he would be thinking, does not my wife not want to go out with me? And everyone's looking from their base temperament perspective. And when you learn temperaments and you realize there's a whole other way of seeing things that I've never actually noticed, it's like, wait, let me see it from that angle. Oh, that's what you're trying to do here. This is how you're seeing things. And so this is a crucial part in the journey of self-knowledge and relationships and the medicine for love. When you start to see it like this, subhanAllah, the world changes.
That is amazing.
Truly.
I love that example that you've given. However, when it comes to that, do you think that they have to have the same temperament, or even over time we can adjust so that we can actually, because it's not about having the same or something which is completely opposite, because I think that when you know yourself and you know the other, then you can compromise and you can actually be sometimes of the other, or, be like the other, or do what the other wants, and vice versa. Is that a possibility? Or do you think that that doesn't work either? And even how do you know of yourself and the other person's temperament? I mean, what is it that you do in your workshops that we get to go there? Obviously, we're not going to do the workshop now, but can you give us some slight tips so that maybe we can get enticed to going?
It's a very good question. And there's a lot of questions there, to be honest, right? And I think that as you asked, you started to realize that all of those answers were predicated upon the next question, and the next question, which led to the fundamental question is, well, hang on a second, all of this really is based on, do we know ourselves first before we discuss what's an optimal way of being, or should we have the same temperament? Should two people have two opposite temperaments? Opposites attract, but when you keep them together for a long time, it can get very irritating. People have a similar temperament generally flock together until, because
but that could be
both
boring
of a
then,
similar
don't you think? Don't you think that could be boring sometimes? Especially if you're in a long-term marriage.
It may not. To be honest, the one who says it can get boring is probably indicative of their own temperament, right? Because that kind of shows.
Am I showing my temperament right now?
Right, yeah. So and it's normal and it's natural that there are those who would want to keep it kind of fresh, whereas others would be like, well, you're here, I'm here, I have my role, you have your role, and as long as we can keep this going, we build this institution of marriage. But the other one's like, but I want to taste it, I want to experience it. Right? And it's like, well, we experience it by establishing it over 20 years, and it's like, no, I want it now. So these are two different perspectives, for example. So the first thing absolutely is to come to know oneself, which requires a great amount of honesty and self-reflection. Most people do like temperament questionnaires, and I always say don't, because what happens when people do questionnaires online, Fahima, what they do is they tick all these answers of what they think they are or what they'd actually like to be. And I always love to say to somebody, just put like your sibling or a close friend next to you and watch them look at you like, what? Right? And it's like, oh, hang on a second. And you have to be very real with it. So we do a series of questions, and then I try to catch people off guard with some subconscious activities. So people then kind of like, even when people stand, for example, there are those when, with this question that you asked, Fahima, there are those who would literally be like, come on, Muhammad Isaac, tell us what we're supposed to do. And others who would be like, so what am I supposed to do again? And the difference between a more active approach or an analytical approach, etc., etc. And I think that already, I mean, we can't cover so much of it today, but those are the ways in which we start to have those discussions. We start to look at, so first of all, come to know your own temperament, come to know the other person's temperament, read a course, whatever the road is. And once you have that, then you can start to see where relationships actually, because most people, what happens is, the couple met maybe in their primary or secondary temperament, for example. So But we work at this kind of combination, and then from that combination, that's our place together, for example. But if we don't go there, often enough, we are just our other aspects where I'm just do, and you are listen, and I'm talk, and you're like quiet. And where we first find ourselves, maybe a time that's gone now. And a lot of healing in relationships is actually, let's get back to that kind of, that principle that I share. It's easier when I have the whiteboard to show it, but it's super simplifying these incredibly complex and dynamic human beings. But there is a formula. We have behavioral patterns. And
Yes,
what's really,
absolutely.
we do this one module on like language and terms that we use. And that's what, really gets people, because they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I use that word all the time.
How long
Right?
is
There
your
are those who
course?
are more
How long is your course for this, so that people can actually go through that sort of thing? Or do you think there's different levels? I mean, even does temperament change? I mean, do they come at different phases and stages? How does that work?
Yeah. So the these are the questions that we answer in the workshop, right? I'll just answer it here quickly. It's not that complicated. The primary mizaj of a person doesn't change. There's a hadith, very interesting hadith, that I've seen two variations of this hadith, which says, one says a rope and the other one says a mountain. And along the lines, I'll just give the Hukam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where that if you were to see a mountain move from its place, believe that it's moved before you believe a person's nature has changed.
Okay.
Right? That if you were to see a rope move from its place, believe that the rope moved, and the rope being that it's there for a reason. Believe that the rope has moved before you believe a person's nature. Now, what we mean here is contextually, like the idea, obviously we as per the understanding of the teachers, is that it's an indication of the natural what we call tabi'iyya. And it's interesting, Fahima, that in Urdu, for example, people say, aapki tabiyat kaisi hai? Tabiyat literally is the same word, tabi'iyya. So what they're saying is, how's your temperament? When they say aapki tabiyat kaisi hai, they say, how's your temperament doing? Which
I'm really
basically
sorry,
means,
but
how
I
are
don't
you?
understand that. So you're going to have to translate for me.
So when people say like, how are you, right? So when they say like, how are you doing, or how are you getting on, they use this word tabi'iyya and there's many different examples I can give in tons of languages, but it's so interesting that they would use this word that actually means, how's your nature? That's what they're asking. They're saying literally, how's your nature? Like in Arabic, they say, how's your state? Kayf al-hal, right? Which is
Exactly.
your state. But in Urdu, there would be an example of like, how's your nature doing? And there's many different examples when we say like a person of a bad temperament, things like that, or bad humor, ill humor. Humor was the old word for temperament. So when they say an ill person, is that this person's got an imbalance. And we're talking about relationships here, but a lot of the times there's a massive amount of healing for people just to kind of get back to a balanced temperament. And so there's all these toxic versions of each temperament as well, which all of us have traits
Well,
of.
now that you mentioned that, it's perfect time to sort of take a break and come back and sort of make sure that people are taking note. I think we need a breather because it's so deep and it's so interesting. And I love everything that you've said. It's absolutely amazing to have you on the program so far. It's just been mind-blowing. It's a different level of understanding. I think that's what it's about. We always look at things in such a surface way and things that are just thrown at us. But the way you're speaking, it's really even enlightening and refreshing to even listen to right here, right now. So I think, everyone that is just tuned in, or you've just caught, a bit of the show, I would really advise you to rewind, take a notebook, and make sure you also take Mohammed Isaaq's details. We're going to also come back very shortly where we'll be getting some of his details, and inshallah we will be seeing you very shortly to have another part of the conversation where we were discussing something absolutely profound, medicine for love. And inshallah we will see you in a few moments. Please don't go away, and we will see you shortly. Salam bye.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We are here discussing medicine for love with the lovely Mohammed. And also, this is the final part of the show. Please make sure that you do take advantage by rewinding back and watching, because we've given so much detail and information. I've really bombarded you with questions and haven't finished yet. So, Mohammed, we were talking about obviously the temperament. What would be the next thing that we need to sort of, think about when we are discussing relationships and obviously human behavior, in order for us to understand, real love and how to find it, not just for the other person to give us, because that's what we always think as well. Love is something that we need to receive from someone else, and that's what makes us whole. That's what makes us, in a relationship, and that's how we are happy. Because even psychologists nowadays in research is saying, love is happiness, love is medicine, love is healing. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I already said love is science. So, but that's me following, a particular position from one of our teachers, and love is to make sacred, and to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the ultimate love. And any love that's not, connected to the divine, where does that end up? So, I mean, these are just things again to like consider and different perspectives. But yeah, I mean, like once a person kind of becomes aware of this idea of the mizaj and a personal contribution that one is unaware of to every scenario in one's life, especially in the context of a relationship. Now, there's two places that we're in now. If you're a single person, you want to be asking yourself, where do I go from here? A married person would ask themselves where do they want to go. More important than that is ultimately our greater objective. The temperament that we have naturally is like the raw material that God has given us. Some of us are like the raw material is like wood, others it's metal. The nurturing, the akhlaq, the tarbiyah, whatever we, what we choose to do with our lives that will impact our natures, essentially is how we're finishing and molding these two raw materials. They can't be finished in the same manner. Wood and metal are very different in their natures, which is just like all of us. So first of all, we have to understand that, and there's a beautiful verse where Allah says, Inna Allah ashtara min al-mu'minina anfusahum, that Allah has purchased from the believers themselves. This idea being that first and foremost, that, we have an end goal with this, right? We have an end goal with our nature, and we're supposed to condition this to the best possible form that we can make of it. That is when people find their purpose. That's when they find their passion. Because just, for him, I've seen what, mashallah, the amazing work that you do. And isn't it so interesting when a person does what is natural for them and what they love to do? Aren't they just like in, cloud nine at that point? So this is, so if that's in the case of work, what about in the case of a relationship? What about when we're looking at how our relationships work? So that's the first thing, is to just understand that I need to be this best version of myself that I can be by working on my nature and not giving in to my, lower desires or my personal comfort spaces constantly, and, living in my comfort zone, but I have to develop. That's the first thing. And then the second thing becomes that when I'm dealing with this person or when I'm working with this person, I also want to bring the best out of them. So when these two best versions of two people can form this beautiful experience, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a parent-child relationship, or siblings, whatever it may be, friends, whatever. And that's where then this idea of understanding another, understanding their perspective, understanding where they're coming from, and how we can best look after them, right? And how we can take care of them, and open communication, so you can share what actually is important. Because some people, you said something very interesting before. I don't know if it was in the break or before the break, where you said that, many times we find ourselves having a surface level conversation, yet this seems to be more at the roots of things. Imagine when we're dealing with problems in our lives, we deal with them at a particular base level, a surface level, and we don't go into the roots of these things. What the temperament aspect does is it actually goes to the root of a situation, and what it reminds you are your roots. So when you tell the next person, whoever you're involved with, or you're looking to get married or whatever, you can actually be far more honest with them. It's very confronting. Like, it's fun at the start. Everyone's all excited. Oh, do you know your temperament? Yeah. Oh, I think I might be this one. And we always say, don't share your temperaments with anyone, because it's nobody else's business unless they they're close to you. But along with that, it is important to remember that, well, once you know that, right, you want to be able to work on that. And as you work on that, you work with another, and in the process, you start to like take care of yourself, make the best version of yourself, make the best version of them, and hopefully the best version of your possible potential relationship. And that's hard work, and that is confronting, and that's why, as much as people laugh in the workshops, they also cry in the workshops. And I don't think there's such a thing of being real if you're not, going to go to those two places. And a
Would
lot
it be
of the laugh.
helpful for someone who has, been in a broken relationship, like divorced, or they've been in trauma, or they've had a lot of rejection, or is it just for the normal person looking for a relationship, or someone who is already in a relationship? What would you cater for something like that in your workshops?
Yeah, so the general workshops, the knowing yourself classes that we do are like, a default for everyone. We literally have, I mean, we had one lady, she attended, and she sent me like this voice note, and she said, I've never seen a workshop where you have like a hijabi, a non-hijabi, a niqabi, a convert Muslim, a non-Muslim, a Muslim. She said, I just, and different ethnicities. I couldn't believe how universal it was, and how you guys actually did it. And it's a kudos to the team and these wonderful, people that have formed from all these classes who now host the programs. Allah bless them and their efforts. But it is for everybody. But we also do like specialist classes as well. So we go into like the mental health aspect alone, which is incredible for people who are journeying from their temperaments for healing. We have the relationship classes. We have retreats. We have this summit that I'm doing very soon. I'm the worst with dates.
Well,
So
while you're actually talking about that, could you maybe share, even I don't want to wait till the end in case anyone is actually interested. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way, and where will they be able to reach you?
Sure. Most of the stuff that we do, so if you just like on Instagram, a lot of it's like regular. The most regular updates will always be on Instagram. And it's pretty straightforward. It's just Isaac.Mohammed. So it's my name with my surname first, because that's just what we like to do. And then and then if you follow the Knowing Yourself, knowing.yourself on Instagram, Knowing Yourself page on Facebook. The website is oh,
That's fine. We can always find it.
mohammedisaac.com/KYO or something like that.
Right.
And then there's a bunch of links, but essentially there will always be a place where you can see upcoming workshops, and from there's anything that's happening. Like I said, we do retreats. We're really the next, I think, wave of work that I want to focus on is the gender aspect. So really, kind of like people starting to see these gender dynamics in the context of temperaments and relationships. And we do like a retreat in Turkey called the Alignment Retreat. Alhamdulillah, we'll be out again next year. We'll be in the States, in the USA, doing a tour next year. So we have some interesting upcoming things, but we also have a current sale for people, and it's the best time to get to nab like a good amount of courses for like a ridiculously like 70% off. You get access for 6 months. It's actually the most we've ever put online like this to ever access. So don't sleep on it if you're interested. It's the best, most valuable, for your time being out there. And you'll also find that, I got told off
No,
today
well,
again
I'm
by
glad I asked that question, because to be honest, it's really important. The work you do is so vital, it's crucial, and it's very unique. That's what I think. And I think there's nothing like that I've known that exists for the work that you do, and especially with the experience and knowledge that you have. So mashallah, I'm really, really, really honored to have you on. And we do have only about 4 minutes left before the end of the show. Can you believe how quick that's gone? And I want to make sure that I just get as much out of you as I can for my own medicine. So tell me a few, maybe some, words or something that you would like to share as sort of like a conclusion for the audience and anyone that's watching with regards to this entire topic.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like, just being honest with yourself, understanding the importance of knowledge. All this conversation was rooted in seeking knowledge. There's a wonderful dua that if I could leave anyone with anything, is to just maybe just read this dua often for yourself, which is Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. That, oh Allah, show us the truth as the truth truly is, and grant me the ability to follow it, and show me the falsehood as falsehood truly is, and grant me the ability to avoid it. Now, this important maxim guides a person when working the temperament, when working these various different philosophies out there that we are exposed to, and we are unaware of the nature of them and the effect that they have on us. And it's like a person eating cheeseburgers up until a certain age, and then all of a sudden the arteries are all clogged up, and they're like, well, when did that happen? You might want to examine the cheeseburgers in a similar manner. You might want to examine the types of ideas and things that you're exposed to. And we have this rich Islamic tradition, and I wish and I hope that this, if anything, it inspires people to just begin learning and begin taking reflection more seriously. And if we can start to do that as a community, we can truly like start to change ourselves. And what happens when we change ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
That's when
If
that big
someone is
transformation
trying to start off, what would you recommend would be the first thing? Either a book or some sort of like, lecture to look at, or a scholar to listen to. What would your recommendation be? I know it's probably taking you back a bit, but how would you sort of go about starting that journey?
I think if anyone's like genuinely interested in the books, there's a bunch of books that I generally recommend. There's this book called The Temperament God Gave You. It's from a Catholic tradition. So just be aware of that. But other than that, you can still take, I mean, you have to understand you're not studying theology, so it's a temperament related book. It's really interesting. In the Catholic tradition, by the way, they would study temperaments for 6 months before a person got married.
Wow.
So
Well, we have
imagine,
a lot to
right?
learn generally. And you know what? We've learned a lot from you today. So because we've
Alhamdulillah.
come to the end, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today. It's been
Alhamdulillah.
absolutely
Thank you.
amazing.
Oh,
Really,
thank you so
really
much for having me.
appreciate it from all of us here on British Muslim TV. And we hope to, inshallah, have you back, and also to hear, more about your stories, especially with people that you have, worked with in the workshops, and really, really appreciate your time. Honestly, it's been absolutely phenomenal and really, really profound to hear you speak in the way that you do. Like I said, I've not had a guest so far on this level. So thank you so much, Mohammed. Really, really appreciate it. And
Very kind of you.
no, honestly. And also to all the viewers, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time. And also keep sending in your comments, your sort of, emails. We do receive them. I do try and respond as much as I can. If there's anything that you require, please do reach out. But we will be back same time next week. Hope you have a lovely night. And inshallah, we will see you next time. Take care. Salam.